What are we talking about?
You play to win the game. You don't play to just play. Come after me! I'm a man! I'm for you! Can't wait! Let's go!
What is going on, everybody? It is your boy, Guardy3, and off to my right, the man who might know more basketball than I do, Mr. Basketball himself, Mo Betta. Mo, how are you doing today?
Doing well. What's good, everybody out there in the chat? Appreciate all the support. Appreciate everybody that's checking us out live on N1.
So, of course, if you're not familiar with N1, we start off the same way every week. We like to bring you an underrated player that you should check out. So, ladies and gentlemen, starting off N1, starting off with our underrated player of the week. So, Mo, we can start off with you. You have an underrated player for this week?
I do. I'm going to go a little outside the box. He wasn't like a superstar, but he had a long career, a great two-way player, could guard all kind of positions, athletic guy. Andre Karolinko from the Utah Jazz, AK-47, 6'7", 6'8" wing, great wingspan, terrific defender, athletic, great finisher. Now, if you saw him later in his career, he might be more famous for getting dunked on by Baron Davis because it's one of the great dunks in playoff history. But Andre Karolinko was just a terrific two-way player, played a long time for the Utah Jazz. I've been a big fan of his game for a long time, so he is my underrated player this week.
He was so versatile. He could play the 3, the 4. He was such a phenomenal defender, and he had some juice on offense. I loved watching AK-47.
No doubt.
And it's funny that you were looking at Utah, because I was also looking at Utah for my underrated player of the week, because I'm going to go with the guy that got argued as maybe to be just as good as Chris Paul. I'm talking about Utah Jazz Darren Williams.
Oh, wow. D-Will. I remember that. I remember that debate at the time, who was the better player. And it wasn't clear cut, obviously, until D-Will went to New Jersey. Then it got a little bit more clear cut.
Yeah, he could really do it all when he with the right coach. Unfortunately, left to his own vices, he got a little on the heavier side. He wasn't as motivated, but
right.
Man, in Utah, he was locked in, and he was so good, that people were trying to figure out who was better between him or Chris Paul.
D-Will had that crazy kind of hesitation move, and he was a bigger point guard, so when he put his body into you, he kind of was able to shiver guys off of him. He had that step-back jump shot. Like, with Jerry Sloan as his coach, in that system, all they did, when you think about it, was instead of Stockton and Malone, it was D-Will and Carlos Boozer.
Oh yeah, that Jazz team had some. That team was a great gold mine for underrated talent with AK earlier, and then you had D-Will, Carlos Boozer, Al Jefferson stayed there for a while. Paul Millsap.
Paul Millsap was nice. Yep.
It's in the count. We got Daniel. He always pops in every week. Thank you, Daniel. Hope you're doing well. And Key says, "What's up?"
Hey, Key, what's up, Key?
All right, so for modern NBA, we got the news. A big trade. Pascal Siakam has been shipped to the Indiana Pacers, and here's the return for it. You got Bruce Brown, Jordan Ora, Kira Lewis Jr., and 3 firsts for Pascal and a second. Mo, what were your initial thoughts when you heard that Pascal was going to be an Indiana Pacer?
When I saw the move, the first thing I thought of the pairing of Pascal Siakam with Halliburton. And I thought what Siakam is going to do, he's going to give them another guy who can go out and get his own shot consistently. He's going to take a lot of pressure off of Halliburton, but at the same time, Pascal's one of those guys that he can play the 3, the 4, but the way the Pacers play fast, he's going to play a lot of small ball 5 as well. I think he gives them more versatility. He gives them a reliable 20-plus score. probably 8 or 9 rebounds, solid defender. To a team who doesn't play a lot of defense. So I think he's an upgrade on both ends of the floor. I think by making this move, this is a young Indiana team saying we needed maybe a little bit, because Pascal's still in his 20s, but they needed more of a veteran presence. Let's call it a sidekick to what Halliburton does, and I think he fits the bill. On the Raptors side, they got Bruce Brown back, who's one of the better rotation players in the NBA. The problem with Bruce Brown was a lot of those younger players on the Pacers, they developed so quickly, he kind of got lost in the shuffle. So I see why Indiana moved on from him. I think that Bruce Brown's final destination won't be the Raptors. When you look at this deal for the Raptors, it's all about those picks. I think Toronto's going to do, let's call it a mini reboot, not a rebuild, because you already can see with Scotty Barnes and the young man they just got from the Knicks, Barrett. I think they think that's their 1 and 2. So I think they're going to build around those two players.
And something that I don't know if it got mentioned or not a lot in mainstream media, but Pascal, I think, is the best, or right up there with one of the best transition finishers in the league. He's extremely elite in transition. Tyrese Halliburton is the best transition passer in the league.
No
so
question.
I think that's going to lead to even more easy buckets for them.
They're going to play. They're going to play faster, Brett. That's what's crazy is as fast as they play now, they're going to play faster. So if you're a team that struggles with pace, or you fall into the trap of their pace, you're going to be in trouble.
Yeah, we got Jory asked, do y'all think 3 picks was too much? I believe the picks they have 2 now in 2024, and they have a 2026 first.
I like Pascal. I think he's a very good player. He's a legitimate all-star caliber player. He's not a superstar. So I love Jory's question because I think it's a valid question. If I were the other end of this, I would have said 3 picks is too much for Pascal Siakam. He's a terrific player, but it's nowhere near. So we can be clear, nowhere near, and it never will be. I don't think he'll ever be as bad as the 4 number ones that Utah got from the T-Wolves for Gobert. But I do think it was a little much. But you know what? I think the Pacers going all in like that, that's them saying, look at our roster. It's filled with nothing but young players, so it's good to get a veteran presence. And I think that they're trying to be contenders, or at least elevate, right? We can say they're probably a playoff team, but by bringing in Siakam, they become one of those teams that has a puncher's chance to upset some of the favorites, right? Like I would say Boston is considered one of the top favorites, right? As is your Milwaukee Bucks, but the Pacers has already had success against both teams because both teams has fallen into the trap of trying to play the Pacers pace. So I just think while we don't call the Pacers title contenders, I think they're capable of knocking off a title contender.
No, I agree that I think this puts them firmly in that 4, 5, 6 seed slot. And I think that if somebody's not careful, that they're going to be going home early. So what's up, Jory?
What's up, Jory?
Hey, that was my question, LOL. Shout out, Keith. Thanks for the great question. Kyle. Hey, Kyle. Kyle's never been a big fan of Pascal, and he says that's way too much for generic.
I like Pascal's game, but I'm with Kyle that it was too much because he's a good, not great player.
I think he's just overtaxed because they try to work him as a number 1 option, and Pascal looked great when he could play off of 2 others, like in that title run. He looked great when he could play off Kyle Lowry and Kawhi Leonard.
And he can be a leading scorer, right? But if he's your leading scorer, then your team's probably mediocre. But if he goes to another place like coming to the Pacers, and don't forget, obviously the Pacers have Mathurin. They have some other weapons there. I think if Pascal falls into that number 2 scorer role, that's a perfect fit for him on that team.
And then, we have a question from John Suggs. Welcome, John. Thank you for tuning in. So what do you think the Bucks need to do, and what should the Warriors do?
I'll let you answer that first.
I think with the Bucks, the answer is they just got to get some more depth, hopefully perimeter defense. I think that's really the answer. We got to find a point of attack defender to at least slow these guys down. We shouldn't be 19th in the league in defense with Giannis and Brooke on the team. That's two DPOY caliber players. Have they proven in years past? We're still 19th in the league in defense. And the thing is, you saw it in the Celtics game, right? We showed that we can actually play like good defense when like locked in, but the effort and like consistency is not there. And that's kind of the issue with this team. But I still think the Bucks still need a piece or two on the perimeter to help out at the point of attack. The Warriors, the Warriors are tough because I don't even know what to do with them.
I'll answer the question for the Warriors. Blow it up. Blow it up. Look, a great run. And if we're being honest, go back to when they won their last championship. Nobody saw that coming. They were good, but that wasn't an all-time great team. A lot of matchups lined up perfectly for them. Don't forget, in that very first round, Sacramento easily could have won that series. Remember, it went 7 games. They could have lost that series, and we wouldn't have been talking about them as champions. So great for them to find a way to get another championship out of that group. But I think that was the last championship you're getting out of that core group. Clay has had some up and down games. He's had games where people said Clay's back, and then right when you say he's back, he has 4 or 5 games where you say Clay needs to be traded. And I think when you go up and down like that, especially in a season where you're looking for a big extension, I think they do. It's time to move. It really is. Look, dynasties, we can all agree, they almost never end in that storybook ending like you see in the movies. It's always more crash and burn, or eventually it's about attrition. The team just gets old. The strange thing about the Warriors, Brett, is this. They could have bucked the trend because of that year where they had the injuries and everybody was out in and out of the lineup. Remember, Clay was gone for the better part of 2 seasons. Draymond and Steph were in and out of the lineup for that time. So they had high draft picks. I would argue, obviously, look, people can say, well, Wiseman, they didn't give him time to develop. Steve Kerr likes veterans. So both things can be true. I think Steve Kerr, yes, when you've had the success that he's had with that core, you're going to defer to veterans. Maybe Wiseman could have been developed more. But if you look at what Wiseman is in Detroit, that's not on Steve Kerr. That's on Wiseman. The mistake is, as good as Bob Myers has been, it was a horrible pick, picking James Wiseman that high. He just flat out isn't that good. You could have got a James Wiseman in the 2nd round. Hell, I think you could get a James Wiseman at the Y. That's what I think of James Wiseman as a basketball player. He doesn't have that want. You can see players that play hungry, that play aggressive, that are competitive. He's not competitive. He's got a lot of quit in him. And I hope he proves me wrong and he turns around and makes multiple all-star teams. But I feel really good that he won't. He just isn't that good. And with Jordan Poole panned out. He helped them win a championship, was a 20-plus scorer, but they let the Draymond Green incident, they made a choice between Poole, who became a little bit arrogant, and Draymond, again, who's part of that core, and they chose Draymond. And I would have thought for a player of Poole's potential and talent, even though he's had a horrible season to this point, Brett, you could get more. You should have got more from him than what they got in that trade. And then there's Jonathan Kuminga. I think Kuminga has a chance to be a really good player. I don't know if he's going to be a star, but I think he can be a really good player. I look at Moses Moody, and Moses Moody is one of those guys that'll have a long career because he does a lot of things very good, just not anything great. They didn't get one young player who can lead them into the next 5 or 10 years, and that was the problem. If they had a hit really big, and let's say 2 out of those 4 guys could have been core pieces, then they wouldn't be having the struggles that they had now. And I really think that they're in this weird NBA purgatory, Brett, where we have Steph, who's playing at a high level at age 35, and do we make a move to try to stretch out being relevant, being competitive for titles with Steph, which means basically mortgaging the future? Or do you realize, hey, it's over? Steph, we're going to blow it up, bring some new, maybe younger guys in to develop around you, but we want you to be part of this. Because that's also a big question. If they blow it up, if they bring in younger guys who still need to develop, does Steph Curry want to sit there and be part of that? Because then he becomes kind of in the situation that Dame was in, right? I'm 35, still playing at a high level. I want to compete for titles, and you guys want to do kind of a whole rebuild. I don't have 5 years for these guys to develop. So I think that's the big question when you look at the Warriors front office, which way to go. Still try to push up and make another run? Because the moves they make, Brett, to tell you what they're doing. If they go out and try to get a guy who's an established star, then they're trying to win another title. They're trying to stretch out this period and try to get as much as they can out of Steph Curry. But if they trade and go get guys who aren't big name stars but are younger players, then the rebuild is on, and now it's about the future. I think that's obvious. With the Bucks, I've told you this before. You guys need some athletic wing defenders. You need some young legs, not older veterans, but some younger, active wing defenders, especially at point of attack defender, because Milwaukee is one of the slowest, least athletic teams in the NBA. If you look at the roster, and you're a Bucks fan, once you get past Giannis, who's a freak of an athlete, where are the athletes at? They don't got no athletes. Where they at? Where are the super quick, long, 6'6", athletic 6'7"? They have nobody like that. They're a very slow team. And if they get sped up, they struggle because they just don't have the quickness to stay with quicker, younger athletic teams. So I think they need some athletic, younger wings.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I got stumped on the Warriors because I was trying to think of a move that would like extend that prime, but it just wasn't coming.
It's hard, right? That's what I'm trying to say. Everybody thinks it's so easy. Like, well, all you got to do, guys, move Clay, get a 3-team trade, and bring in who is going, because the guys that they're talking about bringing in, if you trade, I don't know, Clay or whoever, and you bring in a Zach LaVine, that's not going to get you back into the title hunt. It's not a bad move, but I don't think it's a move that elevates the team at all. Like if I'm Steph and you tell me we're thinking about getting rid of Clay and bringing in Zach LaVine, if I'm Steph, I'm like, I'd rather keep Clay. You know what I mean? And I totally would get that, because I don't think that's a big enough of an upgrade. It makes you younger, but I don't think it makes you better. So I wondered, is there a big name player, like could Golden State put together a package, Brett, where they could go out and get a Donovan Mitchell? That's a big name player.
That would be interesting. Yeah, they probably could. Honestly, it would take like the rest of the picks and young players that they got, but they could. I think they could pull it off. They could easily match the salaries. That's for sure. But I would look for like a Donovan Mitchell trade rather than try to draft and develop, because they haven't shown me in a while that they can hit on the right players. And that all started with Wiseman drafting a center third overall. When you look back at the Warriors dynasty, it didn't make sense, because look at the centers that were actually used in the Steve Kerr system: Andrew Bogut, Festus Ezeli, Mo Spates. These weren't high-level lottery guys. These were just high, like, IQ centers that knew their role.
Don't forget Kevin Looney as well. Right.
So to me, even like as soon as they made the Wiseman pick, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. Not for this system, no. For a different team, maybe.
But when you watched him in college, the film that you saw on him, like I watched a lot of film on Wiseman. Even in his, you know how everybody has like a highlight reel? Even in his highlight reels, he might be the only guy in his highlight reel that he looks lazy in the highlight reels too. I'm just saying, he didn't seem like a runaway top 3 pick. I did not understand that. And I think that whoever scouted him, they must have scouted him pretty much the way the Pistons scouted Darko Milicic. And you got exactly the same results.
Oh, one of the biggest what ifs ever. What if the Pistons don't draft Darko and literally anybody else that went after him? So let's look at the comments before we get into the next one. Do you think Kyrie's on the move? No, that team needs a secondary creator, and that saves Kyrie. He's not going anywhere.
Nah, he's not going nowhere.
Pool has become larger than life, playing for the ladies in the front row. That's fair.
That's harsh, man.
The only way I see the Warriors getting better is trading Curry and Clay and drafting Bronny and making him the next big star.
All right, let me stop you right there, bro. It's not like Bronny's dominating in college. Slow down. We know who his dad is, but not by default. That doesn't mean he's going to be even close to that. I would argue he's not even the best son. So I actually think Bryce is the better son. If you trade away Steph Curry and you draft Bronny, everybody's getting fired.
Yeah, I have no problem with them drafting Bronny, especially since LeBron wants to play with Bronny. Maybe you draft Bronny and then coerce LeBron into coming on a.
Well, you draft Bronny, but you don't trade away Steph and go.
No.
We're trading away Steph because we want to bring in Bronny and build around Bronny. And then if you do a move like that, the Warriors will never be heard from again for a 10-year period.
No, and the fan base would be outside picketing and trying to burn the arena down at that point.
Look, from what I've seen of Bronny, he's a mid-first round pick right now. From what I've seen of him, that doesn't mean he can't get better, because I've seen guys get drafted late first, early second, and become stars. I don't know if he's going to be a star. I know he's going to have the pressure of a star on him because of his last name. I'm just saying that if you get rid of Steph this season, I don't care, regardless of who you think you're going to draft, you're basically dooming this franchise into a full rebuild, and where they're going to be bottom feeders again for a long time.
I think Bronny, from what I've seen, he looks like a talent that you can have as an important piece to a title team, but he can't be one of the main ones.
Agreed.
To me, his high end, he almost kind of reminds me of a 3-and-D guard, in the vein of Marcus Smart. But
that's funny you said that. I like that one. I was gonna go on more athletic Lonzo, but I like yours.
Yeah, and even with Lonzo, you have Marcus Smart or Lonzo. Are you really building around them? You can build with them, but you're not building around them.
Right. So you get your guys, but guys like Lonzo and Marcus Smart, they're the guys that play next to the guy, right? You feel me? They're never the guy. If it were that simple, then without John Morant, you'd have Marcus Smart and Desmond Bane. You'd be like, we're gonna be good anyway without John. Don't even worry about it because we got Marcus Smart. They're not saying that.
All righty, let's see. And then John says he ain't even a first-round pick, in my opinion.
John, you might be right, fam.
Yeah.
You might be right. I don't think it's a lock. I'm with you.
Well, guys, we are going to take a short break. We're going to throw an ad, and then we're going to talk about who we think are the 10 greatest players to ever play the game of basketball. But there is a caveat, but we will get to that after these messages.
What's up, everybody? It's Cottrell Simpson with Wire to Wire Sports Podcast, where we're going to cover all things breaking news, sports related. We're going to preview games, and we're also going to give you our reaction to the games that have happened before. You can catch us on Wednesdays from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. And if you miss us there, no worries. You can also catch us on Roku with Northeast Streaming Sports Productions from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m.
Hey, and listen, if you're not into all sports and just NFL, we have Sideline to Sideline. That's on Thursday nights from 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 8 p.m. We'll break down the NFL week, the Thursday night game, and we'll preview all NFL action.
And if you're like me and college football is your fix, tune in every Saturday morning at 10 a.m. for Coast to Coast College Football pregame show. We'll review the previous week's action, the day's biggest games. We'll give you our pick'ems, and we'll even give you some teams that are on upset alert.
And if you don't catch us live, you can download us on Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to your podcast. We do also have a YouTube station, Wire to Wire Sports Podcast. Thanks for tuning in.
You got to check out Wire to Wire. Those guys right there, no joke. If you're really into numbers, if you're really into stats, into players, these guys cover it all. If you're wonkish and you're more of an analytics guys, these guys cover it all. That's why I call the guys on Wire to Wire the three wise men. So you got to check out Wire to Wire.
Absolutely. Yesterday at work, I had Wire to Wire blaring over the speaker while we're making food for customers.
I'm with you.
So, Mo and I thought about doing this. We're going to have a little fun this week. We're going to get into the GOAT debate. We're going to talk our 10 greatest players to ever play the game of basketball.
Don't kill us, because everybody's got opinions vary, and I'm one of those kind of guys. If you make a real common sense argument, I'll listen to everything, as long as you don't go out into the Netherlands or do something from the Sci-Fi Channel. I can have a conversation with you. So don't kill us. You can disagree with us, but don't kill the brothers.
Right. So the first thing to point out, it's all opinion based. You depends on what you value. So I don't think there's a wrong answer unless you say Chris Webber's a top 5 player. I've heard that one before. But another thing I want to point out is we are doing this post NBA merger. So 1976 and forward. So you're not going to hear Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, George Mikan, Oscar Robinson,
Bob Cousy, Bob Pettit, people of that nature. No, shockingly, Kyle, no Keith Van Horn. I have him in my next 700, but you know,
he was close.
He just missed my top 600. But yeah, I got you.
But yeah, so let us know what you think, and why don't you drop your own list in the comments, or tell us if you agree or not.
And if you disagree, maybe you like the list, you might just disagree in order. Because I can tell you right now, some of the family out there, we've had this. This is the never-ending debate. I think everybody knows that. And usually, the never-ending debate is about Mr. Jordan, LeBron James. But oddly enough, there's a new argument in an old conversation. And once we finish putting out our top 10s. You'll get what I'm talking about.
So, Mo, do you want to start or do you want me to start?
Nah, you go first.
Got you. At number 10, and this is tough. I try to do ranges on these, so this guy could, to me, he can jump up all the way to number 7. I got Hakeem Olajuwon.
Good. Not bad.
He was a tough one for me. He had Hakeem Olajuwon has an absolute laundry list of accolades. I'd be here all night reading it, and that's what's so tough. And he had so many, that 94 to 96, where he scooped up every award possible in 2 rings, multiple-time MVP. I think what holds him back from me a little is I think guys above him had a longer and better peak and were kind of better in the playoffs. So at number 10, I do have Hakeem Olajuwon.
I'm not bad at that one at all. The Dream is one of the great two-way players in the history of basketball. Maybe the greatest footwork of any big I've ever seen. And his quickness was unique too. He didn't have center quickness. He had like small forward quickness. So the Dream is like, I definitely have him in my top 10. So I'm not mad at that at all.
Oh, fair enough. Mo, who do you got at number 10?
I actually have Steph Curry at number 10. And I know some people might have Steph up there further. I don't think it's an insult to have Steph at number 10. And the main reason why I have him in the top 10 is Steph legitimately has changed the game of basketball. He has. He's made the three-pointer basically the same as a normal jump shot. I remember an era where when a guy took 3 or 4 threes, you thought he was taking too many. In this current era, you have guys who take more threes than twos. I've seen games where Damian Lillard's taken 16 shots and 13 of them have been threes. Steph Curry's taken 25 shots and 16 of them have been threes. This is the era that we've in, but that primarily is based off of what Steph Curry has done, how he's changed the game. And not to mention, he didn't just change the game. We can agree Steph's the greatest shooter in NBA history. And not in that catch and shoot vein. He's unique in that great at catching and shooting, but he can get his own. He can cross you up, step back, and get his own. And that's what separates him from the other all-time great shooters.
And not to mention, people just think three-point shooting with Steph. He's also elite from the mid-range. And that opens up his rim game.
I'm with you. And he's underrated as a finisher around the basket.
And with Steph, too, and another thing that he changed with his shooting, it's not just the amount of threes, it's how deep you're taking them.
Yeah, that's insane. Look, I know when I played in high school, if somebody had took a 45-foot jump shot, I don't care if you didn't break form or not, you would have been sitting on the bench.
Yeah, and now you see kids like LaMelo Ball walking up to the logo, pointing his spot and shooting it. So, that's not normal,
but it's what's impressive is these guys are not just taking 40-foot shots, Brett. They're taking these shots and they're not breaking form. That's crazy.
It's funny. We might as well stay on Steph because he was my number 9.
Oh, see, we're close. We're there. Okay.
I was going to say
I had Elijah Wan at 8, so see, we're in the same neighborhood.
To me, when you are on top of everything we just said, I really value when you can be the guy in a dynasty. When I can set a really elite floor and the ceiling is just 4 championships, I think that's insane. So I like Steph Curry ahead of Hakeem. It's tough. I think as a two-way player, Hakeem clears, but I think the gap on offense is so monumental and as a playmaker that it covers that defensive gap. It's tough, but I got Steph 1 spot ahead of Hakeem at number 9.
Look, again, ours won't be the same, but your explanation, I have no problem with how you position it. Look, this is where people are going to disagree. But if we're going to do a top 10 all time, guys, we have to realize this. It can't be any one thing. So if you want to make the argument, it's about winning rings. Sure, I think that factors in. But then it's got to be about, well, what did you do and and what did you do against the toughest competition? Or did you do more with less? Or maybe you were a better player, but you didn't have as much success? I think all of that, all those kind of things have to go into that conversation. And like Brett said, I just don't think it's any one thing. So who I have at number 8, I have Shaq at 9. I have Shaq at 9. So this is where people, Shaq at 9. Yeah, I have Shaq at 9. I do. And as great as Shaq was, what we really remember is that Laker three-peat. That's what stood out. He was so dominant during that period of that Laker three. And here's the thing. If you want to tell me nobody was as dominant as Shaq during the Laker three-peat, guess what? I agree. I'm with you. But and as big as that three-peat was, and as much as I enjoyed watching it, that wasn't the breadth of his career. It wasn't. And I think people forget that was the more polished Shaq, the most athletic, the most freakish version of Shaq. That guy played in Orlando. I'd never seen someone that big move that way, move that quick, get across the floor the way he did. And as great as Shaq was, did he have flaws? Sure. One, wasn't consistent defensively. He wasn't a great defender. He was a capable defender, but not a great defender. And I think that he wasn't always in the best condition, and that's on him. Look, if Shaquille O'Neal was committed and really wanted it, and he stayed in shape, if he was as driven as a Kobe Bryant, I think the conversation would be, is Shaquille O'Neal the greatest of all time? But be that as it may, that was not the case. And so as much as I love Shaq, it's why I have him at number 9.
Yeah, I think that's fair. That's a great spot for Shaq. I think, unfortunately, his flaw to me, it was on defense. Stretch bigs gave him fits, and his value on defense was he was 7'3". He was tall, and there weren't a lot of floor spacers in there. So I do like Shaq here. I have him slightly higher, but not too much higher than this. So I agree with this placement. I got my number 8. This one was tough because I love this dude so much. He's one of my favorite players of all time. I got Larry Bird.
Bird. Brett, I don't want to interrupt you, but look, our neighborhood looks the same. Maybe the houses are on different sides of the street, but our neighborhood is looking pretty good, so I have no problem.
Larry Bird, I don't really have him much higher than 8. I could have probably snuck him into 7. I could have dropped him as low as, I think I could have dropped him 9, but I like him at this 8 spot. People forget. People say that he was a bad defender. Larry Bird, before the back injury, he was making all NBA defensive teams. He was a great defender, playmaker, and scorer.
Made all NBA defense 3 times.
The real flaw with Larry Bird, he wasn't athletic, so he struggled to finish around the rim. But he knew how to use his body and position it to make an all-NBA defense. He was a good defender in the fact that he knew how to use his length. He wasn't the quickest. Quick guys could give him fits, but he knew how to position himself to make sure he was always contesting shots or ready to grab rebounds.
Great at playing angles. Really great at playing angles. And I would say this about Larry Bird, too. Gene and I had this discussion before, and it was about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. Now, we both agree. We think Magic had a greater career. But we were talking about their peaks. Larry Bird's peak, the very best version of Larry Bird. And by the way, I say this full well with Magic Johnson being my favorite player of all time. Larry Bird's best peak, that 3 year where he won back-to-back MVPs, his peak was better than Magic's peak.
Oh, absolutely, because those were the years he's making the all-defense team as well, so he was getting it done on both sides.
Right.
And you want to talk about impact? I did a video on Larry Bird once. This is a guy that came to a 29-win Celtic team. They went to 60, I think it was 62 wins the next year. What was the difference? Him, and you can say they brought in Pistol Pete, but Pistol Pete was a water pistol at that point. He was washed in 81, so
yeah, he was Skip Bayless then.
Yeah. No disrespect to Pistol Pete, he was a great, but
one of the greats.
He definitely wasn't the big impact. It was just they brought in Larry Bird, and he made a world of difference.
So you had Larry Legend at 8. I already told you I had the Dream at 8. So let me go with who I have at 7. Who I have at 7? Larry Legend. I've got Larry Legend at 7 for all the reasons that you said. I actually think Larry Bird could score in the post as well. He just didn't do it in the traditional sense with jump hooks or step throughs. He would get you in the post and he ended up shooting that fadeaway, and it was money. Like Larry Bird isolated on anybody, even more athletic guys, he would eat you alive because of his ability to create space.
And no matter what you do to Larry Bird, don't throw a white guy on him. That's disrespectful to him. One of my favorite stories of all time. If you haven't heard it, Charles Barkley once said Larry Bird was upset at him, and he asked him what's wrong. It's like, y'all are being disrespectful. Y'all throw a white guy on me. And Larry Bird just died of laughter, or Charles died of laughter.
My favorite Larry Bird story is Kevin McHale said they were playing the Knicks. And do you remember Anthony Mason, big, powerful, strong guy, known for his defense, intimidating? Well,
yeah.
they put Anthony Mason on Larry Bird. And every time Larry Bird made a shot, he would say, on you, muscles, muscles, muscles. I mean, the whole game, Kevin McHale kept saying every time he made it, he said, that's for you, muscles. I just think that Larry Bird was so cocky, so confident, he would give it to anybody.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, at number 7, we kind of already talked about it. My number 7 was Shaq. I put him up an extra spot or two just because of how dominant that peak was. It was hard to touch that. And I almost raised him. To me, he went as low as I didn't really put him any lower. I had him at 7, and I ranged him as high as 5. But I couldn't think about it, so I just I thought this was a good spot for him.
No, look, like I said, I have no problem. Our neighborhood is shaping up pretty good. Our orders are slightly different, but I think they're all in the ballpark. So you got Shaq at 7. So now we're at 6. So when we do 6, this is where I'm going to hear the slander and the disrespect. I don't think it's slander. I don't think it's disrespect. I think this is where he's properly ranked or should be ranked. Now, I think Gene has him 4. I could be wrong, but I think Gene had him at 4. So I've got Kobe Bryant at 6.
Me too.
Oh, see? Great minds, fam. Great minds. I was fortunate enough to watch the beginning of Kobe Bryant's career all the way through the ending. And I remember the ending because I thought I watched it. I was like, this has to be the greatest game a great player ended his career on ever, right? Like, I was like, because I remember when Jordan ended his career with the Wizards, they were playing the Sixers, and I think the Sixers were bombing them. And I don't think Jordan played like the second half, but he came back out to get a standing ovation. I think he finished with like 14 or 15 points. But the way Kobe ended his career was so Kobe, right? Dynamic, fearless, put the team on his back. And you knew going into that game, Brett, Kobe was going to be like, guys, I'm telling you right now, I'm shooting at least 55, 60 shots. And nobody was gonna say anything. And Kobe carried them to a great win. What a way to go out. It was amazing. Look, Kobe Bryant, as driven a basketball player there is, his work ethic, his tenaciousness, he was terrific. Now, what separates Kobe Bryant from the guy who I have much further up is many times people will tell you he's the closest thing. He is the closest thing, but he wasn't the thing. He wasn't the thing. And there is a separation between the two players, not the championships. That's a given. But there's the other things. There's the accolade when you look at it. Jordan's a 10-time scoring champ. I think Kobe led the league in scoring 2 or 3 times. Jordan's got 5 regular season MVPs. Kobe's got 1. Jordan's got 6 finals MVPs. Kobe's got 2. There is a gap. There's a separation. As much as people want to tie them together, they're not tied at the hip. They're not twins. They're twin-like, but they're not twins. There is a gap. And I think sometimes people will tell you, Brett, that what are you talking about? Kobe's I'm not arguing with you. If you want to have a conversation and go, well, Kobe is he might be more talented or more gifted than Michael Jordan. You might be right. You might be right. I don't even have a problem with that conversation. But being more talented is not a default answer to being who's better. That's not how that works. There are a lot of guys who are more polished and more skilled than Giannis is, but they're not remotely better. And that's what people need to know. So I love Kobe, respect Kobe. I don't think it's terrible having Kobe Bryant at number 6, but I know a lot of people are going to lose themselves that I have him at number 6.
I always find that funny when people think it's disrespectful putting Kobe there. Well, you're saying he's the 6th best basketball player of all time. You know how many basketball players there were? Like, that is insane.
Brett, you and I are saying that Kobe Bryant is the 6th best basketball player to ever do it. And somewhere somebody's going to go, the disrespect, the right. Slander.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I always speak highly of Kobe. A lot of people try to drag him with saying things like, well, Shaq carried him in the first 3, but Shaq needed Kobe just as much as Kobe needed Shaq. Like
my favorite Kobe Bryant moment. This is the first championship run. Yes, Shaq was the more dominant player, but I think almost his signature moment. This is before he became the superstar that he would become. Shaq fouls out. I believe it's game 3 or 4 against the Pacers. They go into overtime, and you can see as soon as Shaq fouls out, the Pacers are celebrating. They're like, we got Shaq out the game. They're thinking, we got this now. We're about to take over this series. And Kobe turns to the sidelines, turns to the coach and everybody and goes, I got this. Relax. We're good. And a 21-year-old took over that series that night, took over that game, and was the best player on the floor. And that game ultimately was the reason why the Lakers would go on to win that finals. A lot of people don't remember this. Yes, it was a 6-game series, but had that game played out how most thought it would have played out, that would have been a 7-game series that could have gone anybody's way. So Kobe Bryant at age 21, I knew he was talented, but when he did what he did that night, I knew right then and there he was that guy.
Yeah, absolutely. John says talent and better is different, just like Vince Carter. That's fair.
Oh, John, don't get me started on Vince Carter, man. John, you know what? I think me and you can have a conversation. I'm with you 100%. But look, I'm not gonna mess with Vince tonight. But yeah.
All right, now who do you do it? And then at number 5, I got the guy. I got arguably his rival for that area. People argue whose era it was, and I have Tim Duncan 1 spot ahead of Kobe.
That's crazy. I got Duncan at 5. I get Duncan at 5. Great minds.
Right. I think why I have Duncan ahead of Kobe, I think they're close. I think what helps Duncan in this scenario is he was just the better player for longer, right? Because Kobe, unfortunately, he suffered that Achilles injury, and then he was never the same after. Tim Duncan was still making all NBA defensive teams in 2015. Like, this dude was absolutely insane. And his rookie year, he's all NBA. In his rookie year, we haven't seen anything like that. We haven't seen anything since. This dude started his career as a dominant force and still ended it. Not as dominant, but he's still a dominant defensive anchor. And it showed. And he still came out with 5 titles. And he was one Ray Allen 3 away from having 6.
I just like the way that Tim Duncan, he aged so gracefully, knowing full well the game was changing before him. Remember, as he's aging, Brett, the league is becoming the league that it is now. You know what I mean? Like, he's aging right when it's starting to become what it is now. And he realizes that I'm more valuable now as a defensive presence than I am as an offensive player. Like, I'm the 4th option on offense, but I'm still the key to the defense. I'm still a great player. Like, that's what was amazing to me about Tim Duncan. And you're right. He and Kobe in so many ways are polar opposites, right? Kobe Bryant is a walking highlight reel. Tim Duncan is a lot of things, but he's not Mr. Excitement. The nickname, the big fundamental, Shaq got that right. That's what he was. And you're right. He comes into the league and he's playing with an aging David Robinson, who's a great player in his own right. But he's not playing with prime David Robinson. He's playing with an older David Robinson past his prime, and they win a title in 99. Remember the strike shortened season. They beat that upstart Knicks team led by Allen Houston and Sprewell, Marcus Camby. Right then and there, you're like, Tim Duncan is a problem going forward. He was a problem, and the Spurs were consistently in the title picture. Now, they didn't win all the titles, but there's one thing: if you win titles, and even the years that you don't win them, you're relevant. You're like right there. You're either in the conference finals or you're in the finals competing. Like, Tim Duncan to me is just a great representative of his franchise and of the league. He's underappreciated because he could give you 24 points. He can give you 15 rebounds. He could also dominate the defensive end of the floor in his prime, and he just aged well and into a different role, and not a lot of superstars could transition into that and be happy with that so long as they're still winning.
And not to mention with Tim Duncan, too, he has one of the more underrated carry jobs. That 2003 finals win. People are like, he has David Robinson, Manu, Tony Parker. Tony Parker wasn't developed. Neither was Manu. David Robinson was like, he was literally retired. He was done. And when they needed Tim Duncan the most to close out the Nets, he drops a quadruple double, arguably. They took away a couple blocks at the end. But how many people do we know that, hey, we need you to close these guys out? Oh, there's a quadruple double. He just became whatever the Spurs needed him to be. They needed a closer.
I like that.
He was the closer. They needed him to step back and just be an anchor. He could do that too. And plus, he has the most underrated trash talk game of all time. Have you ever seen the KG stories about that?
I've heard KG say that Tim talks under his breath. It says a lot of stuff under his breath.
He said Tim talks in phrases, so he'll make you miss a shot and go, "Ooh, almost. Nice try." But I swear, I think that would honestly make me more mad than actually like full-on crazy trash talk. If I miss a shot and somebody just goes, "Nice try," I think I'd try to throw hands right on the spot.
Right. And I think people forget that he was also one of those guys that his resolve was like steel. You couldn't get him out of his game. You couldn't get in his head. He got to his spots when he wanted to. Like he had a very methodical approach that was hard to figure out. And I just think that certain guys like a Tim Duncan, they get lost in the shuffle because there are bigger, brighter, more exciting, I guess call it box office stars. Tim Duncan is underrated. And to be honest with you, Brett, I struggled having him at 5. I actually was tempted to push him up further.
I almost pushed him up to 4. I was this close.
Yeah, me too.
I think this is the perfect transition to my number 4. I was this close to pushing him ahead of Magic. And that's...
Brett, you're cheating, bro. You're cheating. Magic's my all-time favorite player. I've got him at number 4. You're cheating. You got my list.
Guys, I promise we did not look at each other's list beforehand.
We did
I had
not.
no clue this was going to happen.
No.
But we both have Magic Johnson as the 4th best player since the NBA merger. And I know a lot of the argument with Magic is you can argue, well, the offense was good without him. You still had Kareem. You still had Michael Cooper. You still had talent. Magic Johnson took what was a good offense and made it an all-time juggernaut. That's really what he did, because that offense, it was good without him. But it just became all-time historically unstoppable with him. And the thing with Magic, he could score, he could pass. His defense wasn't as great as you'd expect out of somebody who's 6'9". But you know what? That's all right. He was versatile on that end. He did just enough so that, and even with, you want to say he was deficient on defense, he more than made up for it on offense.
And I think what Magic was really good at defensively was, he's not locking nobody down one-on-one. And if you watch those Lakers back then, Magic more or less played free safety. He didn't really guard anybody. He played free safety, which is why he led the league in steals like 3 times. So he was impactful defensively, but he was smart enough to know what he couldn't do. Magic wasn't going to jump out and try to guard an Isaiah Thomas one-on-one because he knew that wouldn't work for him. So I think that when you look at his basketball IQ, when you look at the fact that when he came into the league, he didn't have a jump shot. He developed a jump shot. He developed a 3-point shot late in his game. He developed a post game. Like Magic became late when Kareem was late into his career. Magic's post game was better than Kareem's post game. I think people forget that Magic Johnson was such a I know he has that electric smile, but behind that smile, there's a killer. It's a different kind of killer, but there is a killer behind that smile.
And Magic really did help prolong Kareem's career. He made it so he wouldn't have to always be the main focal point on offense. Late in his career, they switched from Kareem post-ups to Kareem and Magic pick and rolls. And when you don't have the pressure of always needing to be the guy to go down and get a bucket, that's huge. And that helped Kareem save a little extra juice for the defensive end.
100% he extended Kareem's career. And if they don't pair up, if they're not teammates, I don't think Kareem plays as long. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was a dominant force before Irvin Johnson came into his life. But when Irvin Johnson came into his life, he actually made Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, who's probably one of the most stoic players in the history of the NBA, he can make Kareem smile. He can make him laugh. Now, that didn't come when they first met, but over time, Magic made Kareem Abdul-Jabbar actually have fun playing basketball again. And so I think that impacted their relationship. It also had an effect on Kareem at the end of his career when he was no longer a star, but he was more of a role player late into his career. I just think that their chemistry, if you will, it clicked immediately. And Magic, like you said, Magic saved Kareem's legs by taking the ball out of his hands and feeding the ball to a James Worthy, or getting the ball to Byron Scott coming off a pin down. Like I just used to love the way he quarterbacked that offense. So look, there are a lot of great players, and the only reason Tim Duncan isn't number 4 is because of Irvin Magic Johnson.
And let's not forget, Magic arguably has the greatest closeout game in NBA Finals history when he stepped in to help play center for Kareem when he went down and ended up, I think it was 42 points or 45 points and
42 points, 7 rebounds, 15 assists.
Yeah, I knew it was something saying a number of assists, but yeah, that was rookie. That was rookie Magic doing that. So
first year in the league. Think about that. He had just won the NCAA championship versus Larry Bird. So he wins that. In his first year in the NBA, he wins it all.
See, I really feel like I was going to hop to number 3. I feel like our list is the same at this point.
It might get dicey.
No, maybe. My number 3 is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Well, there you go.
I was curious about Kareem, right? Because I was like, he had a good career before the merger. So I wonder if this kind of hurts him doing it post-merger. No, he still racked up like 4 MVPs after the merger.
Isn't that crazy?
Like 5 titles. He was still absolutely insane after the merger. So what can you say about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? He was elite scorer. He was elite on defense. And I know a lot of people, and I don't think he has a defensive player of the year to his name, but that's all right. He was still a deterrent on that end.
He was, and don't forget, he is the owner of the greatest shot, the most unstoppable shot in NBA history. Like, as much as Jordan's fadeaway is tough and Kobe's fadeaway is tough, that skyhook. And here's the crazy part: it's an unstoppable shot, and it can be taught. But we're in a different era. You think today's young big men are trying to swing their arms to do a skyhook? They're not doing that. That is a lost art that will never be duplicated. I want to remind people of this. Kareem won 3 MVPs with Milwaukee. He left Milwaukee and won 3 more MVPs with the Lakers. I think that's how great he was. He took the Bucks to 2 NBA finals. They won one of them. The other one went to a game 7 because of a game-winning shot he hit in game 6. That was versus the Celtics. Like, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is one of the most clutch players in the history of the league and one of the most dominant players. And when we talk about greatest players in the history of basketball, his resume, Brett, I'm talking about from high school through college, through the pros, it is the most impressive basketball resume in the history of basketball. Nobody has a better basketball resume than Kareem.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And Kareem, low end is number 3 to me. At a high end, I think you can make a small argument for number 2, but
no, and again, we're in the same neighborhood. My number 3 guy is LeBron. And for everybody out there that's pulling their hair out, or if you don't have any hair, just rubbing your head, I don't think it's an insult to have LeBron James at number 3. Let's start with the obvious. A lot of times people will tell you that today's players are bigger, stronger, faster. And the reality is they're actually not. There are some unique players who are bigger, stronger, faster, like a Joel Embiid and a Joker. You don't see big men who can do what those 2 guys can do, right? You have big men now who weigh 270, who can step out, shoot the 3, have the feathery touch of a guard, can play make like a guard, can Euro step. So those guys are unicorns. But the biggest unicorn that we can both, I think we both agree on this, Shaq is a unicorn, by the way. But Shaq's not a product of this era. Shaq is a product of 1992. So when you say bigger, stronger, faster, that can't be true because nobody's bigger, stronger than Shaq. But a guy who is unique that I don't think will ever be replicated is LeBron James. LeBron James has the power and the strength of the most powerful, the biggest power forwards that ever played. When you think Karl Malone or Charles Barkley, or even somebody who's just a physical presence like a Charles Oakley. LeBron's as big or as strong as any of those guys, and yet he's a perimeter player, Brett. He has a handle. He can break you down off the dribble. He can elevate as if he weighed 220 pounds, but he weighs about 265. He has freakish athleticism, as high a basketball IQ as you will ever see, and is one of the greatest passers in the history of the game. So I give him all those credits. He's that unique. Remember, no college, straight from high school into the NBA, and from that point on, he established himself as one of the best players in the NBA. LeBron James, oftentimes people will say, as good as he is as a scorer, his best skill is passing. I would disagree with that. You're not the NBA's all-time leading scorer because you're a great passer. You're the all-time leading scorer because you're a great scorer. Now, you might not do it as fluently or as skilled as a Kobe or a Michael Jordan, but his consistency, Brett, his ability to attack the basket, like he came into the league being able to get downhill and attack the rim. He's in year 21, getting to the rim, attacking the rim, and putting people on his heels. He is the greatest attacker of the basket in terms of consistency that I've ever seen. And I think he's a great passer. Please, anybody out there listening, don't get me wrong. He's a great passer, but that is not his best skill. His best skill is scoring. That's why he's the all-time leading scorer. It's not like he's led the league in passing 7, 8, 9 times. He's led the league in passing or assists one time. What he is the picture of athleticism, durability, and consistency. He might be the king of consistency. Think about this. It's one thing to be consistent over the period of a season. This man has been great and playing at an all-time level for over 20 years. Over 20 years. So if you're out there listening, you disagreeing, I have him number one. I have no problem with that. We can agree to disagree, but make sure when we're disagreeing, you don't say, well, Mo's disrespecting LeBron. I give LeBron his flowers all the time. He's a great player. He's a great ambassador for the league. But do I think he's the greatest player alive? I don't. I think he's one of the 3 greatest players alive, and I don't think that's an insult.
It absolutely isn't, and I have LeBron at 2. At a low end, I had him at 3 behind Kareem, and as a high end, I had him as the GOAT. As the thing with LeBron, too, another underrated talent skill of his that a lot of people don't talk about, he has all-time great reflexes. If you watch like the 2016 finals, for example, those last 3 games, he averages 3 steals a game. A lot of them, you thought that ball was past him until at the last second. He just sticks a hand up and he's running the other way with it. And he also has and this one might be might be an interesting topic for another day. I think he has the greatest individual season that I have ever seen. That 2013 season where he won the title in 7 games against
Miami, right? Miami.
When he is shooting 40% from 3 and he finishes second in Defensive Player of the Year voting. He's just the most complete player I have ever seen. And I think you can argue in that stretch, he's just the most complete player of all time that anybody's ever seen.
You're not getting a debate from me on that one. I think that season, and he's had a ton of standout seasons, but that is literally catching him at his peak, right? Where he's elite offensively and defensively. He's also elite still as an athlete. Like sometimes as great players age, right, their athleticism dissipates and they have to adjust. Even now in year 21, do I think he's made you can clearly see he's made some adjustments, but what he's been able to do when he's needed it, Brett, in year 21, he can summon athleticism. Like he can come out of nowhere and do a tomahawk dunk. And you're like, where'd that come from? Like he looks like he's in his 5th year or something like that. He is the most unique physical specimen I've ever seen in the NBA. And I know we're talking about a league that had Shaq, and we're talking about a league that has somebody like Durant. I understand that. And those are special, unique physical players. But LeBron is, to me, is one of one. And not just that he's done it at that highest level, is that he's still doing it, Brett. That we can sit here today and say, right now, today, you can still say he's a top 10 player. And nobody would go, you're being crazy, Mo. You and Brett are being crazy. I'm like, are you watching this guy?
I would say if I did pick a number, he probably has like 80-85% athleticism that he had at his peak, which I don't think people understand still how insane that is. Like peak LeBron is just a freak nature, so still retaining most of that athleticism. Yeah, it just he's now 38, so he's just picking his spots better. But I agree, I still think he's a top 10 player easily.
No doubt. So anybody out there that's a LeBron fan, we are not LeBron haters. We're just in disagreement of where maybe you have him 2. Brett has him 2, and I don't have a problem with that. Like I said, that's not crazy. We're just disagreeing. Like for the most part, we literally have the same list. There's some guys shifted around, but we've got the same list. So if you've got him 2, and I've got Kareem 2, and we've talked about both of these great players, obviously I've got Michael Jordan number 1. Now you might have somebody else. You might come out of nowhere and go like, I actually don't have Michael Jordan number 1. I've got Vince Carter. No, I'm just playing. I'm sure. I think we both agree. Well, look, I think Michael Jordan is number 1. And by the way, anybody that thinks that you're no, I say that grudgingly because the same way that I think Brett can say, well, I had LeBron too, but I'm sure there's a part of you that said, like, I could have leaned LeBron 1. And I'm not arguing with you. I got you. Because I could easily have said, I could have put LeBron from where I have him at 3 and put him to 1, and I wouldn't feel embarrassed making that selection. Like I said, these things are so close, right? When you get into that top 3, it's so close. It's nuanced, right? Now, because when you get into that top 3, now it's not just, well, who won the most rings. Then it's well, he made 19 all NBA teams, or he was this many finals MVPs, or the sustained greatness of LeBron, or it is so many different things. Like, an accolade that LeBron has is he's won a title in Cleveland, he's won titles in Miami, he won a title with the Lakers. That to me is a special thing that he's holding on his own when you talk about the elite players. So I would never disrespect his accomplishments. We can agree to disagree. I don't want to go down the list of Michael Jordan's accomplishments. You know about what he did in the finals. You know what he did for the NBA in terms of players being able to market themselves, to bet them themselves. Like, we don't talk about this because it's professional basketball, but Michael Jordan is like he's the original NIL, name, image licensing, right? When he made that relationship with Nike and it took off, and you saw those commercials with Spike Lee, and if you have never seen them, they hold up today. Go look on YouTube, type in Morris Blackman, and it'll put up Michael Jordan, Spike Lee. Michael Jordan, what he did for the city of Chicago, what he did for the league. Like I said, I don't need to go through the accolades. If you know, you know. To me, when you talk about the all-time greatest player of all time, by a nose, I have Michael Jordan. But if you said Kareem, I'm not going to say you're crazy. If you say LeBron James, I'm not going to say you crazy. We just agreed to disagree, and there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, number 1, I had off-season Ben Simmons. Those Instagram posts he has are elite. One thing I did want to mention is John said, surprised he didn't mention Bill Russell. Our lists are from after the NBA merger in 77. So, like, Wilt, Bill, Oscar, they're right. Honorable mention. One honorable mention, though, I did want to include that I almost put in my top 10. Kevin Garnett.
Wow, that's a good look. I that's a good one. And honestly, I don't know where I have KG rated all time. Honestly, you just brought up another conversation. I don't know where I have KD rated all time. So that's an interesting conversation in itself. KG was a great player. I think if you remember him at his prime with the T-Wolves, when he was known, his nickname was the Kid. What he did defensively and offensively, I remember the Lakers battling him the year he won the MVP, and it was him, Sprewell, and Sam Cassell, and that was a great series. Like, Kevin Garnett is one of the all-time greats. You've got my mind wondering. And anybody out in the chat, anybody that's listening to us live, where would you rank Kevin Garnett, and where would you rank Kevin Durant all time?
I know with the list I did on TikTok, granted that was including merger guys, I had KG at like KG sat at like 14. He was number 14 for me. So okay. disincluding Wilt and Bill, and he's in that 11 to 15 range for me. I don't have an exact number right now, but he's in that 11 to 15 range. I'd probably put him one spot either ahead or behind Kevin Durant. That's interesting, but I'd probably put him one spot behind Kevin Durant.
It is interesting because when you think of some of the great players in this era, where, like, even though he's been retired for years, where would a D Wade fall? Like, where, is D Wade is he around 20 or is he in the teens? That conversation alone is probably more interesting than the top 10. Like I said, guys, you want to give us a little bit of help? So please, somebody tell me where you would rank KG, the Kid, Kevin Garnett, and KD, Kevin Durant, all time.
Yes, KD 11th, KG 12th.
Okay. I'm not mad, John. I hear you. And look, anybody that's out there talking about slander and disrespect, again, Brett led with this is before the merger. So when you're talking about iconic players like a Bill Russell, Mr. Russell with the 11 championships and how he led the Celtics, and of course Wilt, who basically put up video game numbers before there were video games. No disrespect to him, the Big O, guys of that nature, Dave Cowens, John Havlicek. Those are iconic players, but a lot of their careers started before the merger, and we didn't want to disrespect anybody. I feel sometimes because they're before the merger, you almost could do a list of iconic players just before the merger,
Right.
And you'd have plenty of guys to choose from.
I think another guy that I almost had put on here, and he was on my TikTok list at number 13, greatest player of all time, Dr. J. But he had his career happened. A lot of his career happened in the ABA. That's kind of why he got left out.
Right.
But
right,
man, he was somebody that I really wanted to find an excuse to put him in here. I was like, too much of your career happened like over there, so I can't do it.
You know, it's crazy. For the longest time, people would always go, Doc was your favorite player's favorite player, right? Like Michael Jordan said it. His favorite player, it was Dr. J. Like, I get that, right? Doc was that guy. Doc is iconic. He was iconic to the 70s and early 80s, the way Iverson was iconic from the mid 90s into the 2000s. There are some guys who are iconic in different ways. If you were going to ask me where would I place them, I don't know exactly where I would place them, but I would definitely have Doc. And this is no disrespect because I'm a fan of Allen Iverson's. I would have Doc higher on a list than Allen Iverson.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the most interesting all-time debates that I saw a guy, and he was making a legitimate argument. He said, I have George Gervin ranked higher than Allen Iverson. I was like, oh, Iceman, that is an interesting one. And it's
look at the Iceman's numbers. I think for his career, he shot over 50. I think he shot over 50% for his career. He was a great scorer, but he was an efficient scorer as well, and could score from anywhere on the floor. On the perimeter, he could take you to the basket. He had a handle, shot free throws at a high percentage. Like some of those great scorers in the late 70s, early 80s, like the Iceman, they kind of get lost over time. But if you enjoy the game, then you acknowledge how great George Gervin was. You can acknowledge how great somebody like he's a lot more well known, but his name is Walter Davis, aka the Greyhound. He played for the Phoenix Suns. I've never seen anybody, this is including Michael Jordan, get the kind of lift that Walter Davis got on his jump shot. He was amazing.
Say Barkley and IT. I would say Charles Barkley is probably like, and this is all off the top of my head because I didn't have really a list past.
I think Isaiah Thomas would be ranked ahead of Charles Barkley.
I think so too. I think they're both probably, if I had a number, probably like top 20, top 25, top 30. I like top 30 off the top of my head.
I would say that I would have them both in the 20s. I just don't know exactly where, but in the 20s. And don't forget, if you have them in the 20s, I have to assume Karl Malone is somewhere in there as well.
And we have
that's a great one, John, because when you just had us saying where we had KG and KD, and even though I think KG is a better overall basketball player, I do think he and Dirk are kind of connected. And so where would Dirk go? Because Dirk was a great player in his own right. Dirk was great. And if not for one of those Spurs teams, Dirk could have had 2 titles. If not for Dwayne Wade shooting 500 free throws in 2006, he could have had a title.
I was about to say, if it wasn't for the 96 free throws in 6 games, it's an insane number to think about.
By the way, Dirk, you know who you can blame for that? You can blame your owner. Because right after they saw the Spurs and Pistons, they got the competition committee it was the Lakers. It was the Lakers and the Pistons. They started that about the game's too physical and you got to find a way to free up great players. So they changed the hand checking rule again, but it did not go into effect until that season. Hence the reason why Dwayne Wade shot 1,000 free throws.
Oh, I love me some Moses Malone.
Another great player.
I think Moses Malone, I have him as like, I don't know about an all-time list. I know on like an all-time center list, I have him, I think it was 6 or 7. He's such a phenomenal talent that not enough people talk about. He was the piece that really brought them over the edge against that Lakers team. He absolutely dog-walked Kareem in that series.
He gave Kareem the business. Now, because I'm a Laker fan, I want to remind people, he gave Kareem the business, but this is Moses Malone at his prime at age 27. Kareem was 35. I just want you to know.
Context is important with that one. And of course, Knicks legend Patrick Ewing.
If we're just ranking centers, is Patrick Ewing? I want to say he's a top 10 center, but I feel like I don't want to rush that because Brett, right now, as we're living in this moment, we're watching Embiid and Joker do what they're doing, and you know that they're going to be a lot for it because we don't know how their careers are going to play out. But right now, I have to think that they might both be in the top 5, right? Like that's what's crazy. I think they've already moved out some all-time greats. I don't know. I think because we're watching those two have the careers that they're having, I can't say for sure that I don't know if Patrick Ewing's top 10 because let's start with default. By default, we're going to say Russell and Chamberlain are in the top 10, right? We have to.
Yeah.
Beyond era, Wilt Chamberlain and Bill Russell are top 10. That's a given because of their resumes. As great as Patrick Ewing was, he didn't have Chamberlain's crazy statistical dominance. He didn't have Russell's team dominance. So I don't know where you would place him because, again, in between him, now we're talking about David Robinson. We're talking about Shaq. We're talking about Olajuwon. The further we go, then you throw in Embiid and Joker. I want to say Patrick Ewing's top 10, but I don't know. I don't know.
I think if he is, he would be like right at 10.
10? He must be at 10, right? Which means that he's 10. How about this, guys? To show respect to the great Georgetown / Knicks legend, we got him top 10, but top 10 with an asterisk because by the time these two guys are done, they're shoving somebody out. They're shoving a couple of guys out.
Right, and another guy you got to think about with that list is George Mikan. 50s, they had to widen the lane and change the game because of George Mikan. So that's what makes these lists so tough, and that's what makes really ranking these older guys so tough because some of
they did that for Wilt too. They had to do it again for Wilt. And don't forget, when the Lakers three-peated, what do you think they did going into that 4th season when they were trying to four-peat? They changed the rules again, and they allowed it to where you could basically play. You could have a man in front of Shaq and a man in back of Shaq. You just had to go in and out of the lane, so they didn't call defensive 3 seconds. But they changed the way you could guard him. They did that. Let's keep it real. They did that because they didn't know how else to slow him down.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, that is all we had for you. I hope you enjoyed our list. Mo, honestly, I love doing lists. That was a lot of fun.
Well, look, first of all, since we basically had the same list, I'm going to say to you, great list, Brett. Great list.
Thank you. You too.
I appreciate that, man. I do. And thanks for everybody out there for checking us out live. Thank you for everybody that will check us out later. Like I said, the support is much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Damian, John, shout out to the Bob McAdoo reference.
Absolutely.
Kyle,
another great
Jordan,
guy.
Key,
thank you.
Everybody who tuned in, thank you. And anybody who's listening, we appreciate you. And I hope everybody here has a good night.